being asked to accompany all these players, Sonny Rollins, Dexter Gordon, Roland Kirk, Ben Webster, Zoot Sims, Stan Getz, Freddie Hubbard, how nervous were you any of those times?
I wasn't nervous. You know, if they didn't like it, they could always say go. It's no good getting nervous because, you know, it's going to show in your playing. I suppose I was a teeny bit arrogant about it. You know, they're only people after all.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I didn't get nervous.
Well, perhaps the arrogance might have even helped at that point. Had
Yeah.
you been maybe old enough to be aware of what you were dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, any nervousness there was came once the gig started. You know, I'm thinking of two people in particular, Don Byers and Lucky Thompson, were not nice people to work with. And it wasn't nervous, it was like, oh God, you know, what's he going to do? How's he going to be? And, you know, they give us a hard time, I understand. But, you know, you took it on the chin and grinned, and they don't like it. Like I said, they can always say to Ronnie, I don't want this guy. But they never did, so...
So you must have been doing something right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just going to switch to the next. Now, you played later with many years later with the Charlie Watts Orchestra, but what was your impression of the rock and roll music emerging at the time?
I wasn't impressed. No, I didn't like it. Still don't. You know, it's nothing to do with me. It's something else that's going on. Musically, I saw no value in it at all. That's the short answer.
And yet some of those players, or several of those players, Charlie Watts for one, Ginger Baker, must surely have been aware of what you were doing.
Well, if they were, I wasn't aware of it.
Now, the Monk influence. You played one of his pieces last night, and it's there are many comparisons. Your playing often gets compared to Monk. How careful do you think one has to be when evoking such a unique voice? To, on the one hand, not fall into imitating, and then on the other hand, maybe bringing too much of yourself to that signature style.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, like, sometimes, you know, it needn't be a Monk tune. I suddenly realise that I can hear echoes, and I think, well, so be it. You know, if that's what's coming out, let it come out. But you know, I don't strive to sound like, or you know, to create an impression of Monk. It's just that I agree with his point of view. What can I say?
Well, a lot of people would agree with you there. But from last night's, from your first performance here at the Rochester International Jazz Festival, you one could hear traces in throughout the performance. But then you played one of his pieces by, and at least my impression was that almost sounded less like Monk, and there was, if I'm not mistaken, an effort to sort of take that to another place, or maybe emphasize the composition itself. Because I think people, when you think of Monk, you think of the composition and the phrasing, the style, in one.
Yeah.
It's hard to separate the two, but your trio's interpretation of By, it brought to light the actual composition underneath the quirkiness there. So I don't know how
yeah, I mean,
that would be, but
it's, how can I put it? Once you start improvising on any tune, you know, you're going on an unknown journey, you know. You can't really map out where you're going. You know, one thing sort of suggests another, and then take it there, and take it there, and you or I just follow where it's going. It's a strange process. It's very hard to explain.
Sure, sure. Now, of all the people that you've worked with, I mean, I could ask you questions all day about specific players, but one in particular stands out. Speaking of Monk, you and your son Clark have played with Charlie Rouse in the '80s.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, what was that like? What was your rapport with him like creatively? Where was he at in his playing, and how special was that, having been influenced by Monk as much as you have been?
Yeah, it was sort of special. You know, Charlie was playing good, and you know, we played a lot of Monk tunes. Yeah, I enjoyed the experience. He was a nice guy.
And now, for your well-known composition, Under Milk Wood, what was it about Dylan Thomas's poetry that inspired you? I understand you had heard something from a record of a BBC reading that your wife was playing at home.
No, actually what it was, you know, she worked for a record company, and you know, she was able to get all sorts of recordings from all the other companies, and she just brought this one home. It was a recording of the play in New York with American actors playing Welshmen, and Dylan Thomas was the narrator. But and that was the first time I'd heard it, my first encounter with Dylan Thomas. And you know, the play just blew me away. You know, I thought it was beautiful. And the way the record came about was because I had an album to do. We went into the studio. We weren't happy with what happened, and I decided, you know, I'd go away and try something else. And at that time, it was supposed to be a good idea to have a hook for the album.
Some sort of selling point, you mean?
Yeah. So, since, you know, at that time, you know, as I just said, I'd listened to that album, I decided that I'd like that to be my hook. So then I just selected characters and places from the play, and wrote for it.
How convincing were the American actors with their Welsh accents?
Not terribly.
I'm not surprised.